Hello, everyone. I'm Oret Wilson, and I'm doing my second in a series of videos how to design a solar system. In my last video, how to design or to size a battery based system, we went into the reason why we would need to start at this particular point. If we look on YouTube, there are hundreds of thousands of solar systems showing you how to build panels, how to put together everything. But one thing nobody takes the time out to talk about is the starting point, where to start at. Let's face it, you're interested in going to alternative energy. Now, where do you start? Do you know how many panels you will need on your rooftop? Do you know what size inverter you will need? Do you know the number of batteries you will need? All this can be eliminated from having a design mechanism in place. And so, what I'm offering you today, what I'm sharing with you today, is a starting point. Now, where do we start? From that video, you'd have noticed if you check YouTube, it is entitled How to Size a Battery Based Solar System. You will notice when you listen to that video that I start with what is called a loads list. Now, what's the purpose of the loads list? The purpose of the loads list is to ensure that you capture all the appliances that you'll be using on a day-to-day basis so that you can ascertain your consumption on a daily basis. Now, from that, you will size also from that sheet. As I mentioned in that video, you can also have an idea as to the size inverter. You may choose to go 10% higher. You may choose to go 10% lower. It's up to you. Also, at this starting point, you get the opportunity to look at your finances because when you do your loads list, you can tell if you can do a full scale solar integration or you can start part and expand as you go on. Now, when you go on the internet, as it were, and look at what is being offered, take for example, just last week I was looking at a site that one individual he's offering the installation of off-grid system. And he mentioned four main components: your panels, your inverter, your charge controller, and your batteries. Now, for a beginner, how would you know how many panels you need? How would you know what size inverter you need? How would you know what size charge controller to use? How would you know how much batteries you need to adequately cover your needs? And this is where my program comes in. Again, as I said, you need to start at a point. Now, when you approach companies, let's say you're interested in solarizing your home, and you approach companies to come in and do an assessment for you. Here in my country, many of the solar people, they tend to ask you for a copy of your utility bill. That may be fine. However, on a month-to-month basis, your consumption changes. It means, therefore, if for the month of August, the summer months, yes, you're going to run the AC because of the heat, but then what happens in December when it gets cool? Will you be running the AC? No. And so your consumption will change. Could you size a solar system based on that? No, it would be inconsistent. And so, from what I'm offering as a start, the loads list, you can go through, input all the appliances that you will use on a daily basis and get an average of what you need. So that average, you can use it from month to month to month. So whether the summer months, the autumn months, the winter months, it doesn't matter, or the spring months, it doesn't matter. You would have in your mind a sample of what you're working with. And so I encourage you to look at that. Incidentally, that particular video, look at a off-grid situation. And so when you go on to the page where it is in my website, renewableenergytoo.com, you can listen to that video. I give you a sample presentation with figures and everything, so it gives you an idea of how you can size a battery-based system. Battery-based system that is a standalone system, as it were, and it will be equivalent to coming off the grid completely. And yes, you'll be generating your own electricity, but at the same time, you need not worry that you will lose anything that the grid would have provided on a day-to-day basis. So what I'd encourage you to do, visit that website, renewableenergytoo.com. When you reach there, then there is an opt-in box. You can put in your email, your name and your email address, and you will be downloaded. You will get the opportunity to download the loads list that you can start your own design with. Yes. So once you do that, you'll be on your way. If you find that you need any additional information, then you can always drop me a line at robzidanenterprise. robzidanenterprise at hotmail.com. I also encourage you to visit my blog page, robzidan.blogspot.com. There I have information about sizing, implementation, you name it. There's a wealth of information that you can benefit from as you look to design your own solar system. With that said, who am I? Well, as I mentioned, my name is Art Wilson. For the last 8 years, I've been looking at solar designs. Having scoured the net, I've gone through a lot of things. I've seen where there's information as how to build panels, there's information as how to lay out, but there's no information for the beginning, to start, the start. So it's my intention to help individuals, those who are especially do-it-yourselfers, to start at the beginning, to size, to know exactly what their pockets can afford and how in the long term they can implement a little at a time until they reach what they want. And like I said, I encourage you to visit that YouTube presentation, and it gives you a brief overview as to what is to be expected. Today, our presentation continues with sizing a grid tie system. Now, The beauty about a grid tie system, as opposed to a standalone battery based system, is that for one, you have less components to worry yourself about. All you would need are panels, inverter, and that's it. However, because you want to ensure savings, as it were, you would want to know how to size or how many panels you would need for them to work during the day, because this is how the grid tie works. If you're a working person and you're gone, what appliances would you have that would work during the day while you're out at work? For most households, it would be a refrigerator. Yes. Would you need to turn off your refrigerator every day while you're at work? That would be absurd, wouldn't it? While you're on the grid all by itself, the refrigerator consumes energy, and so you're paying for that energy throughout the course of the day. Then, when you and your family gets back home, the radio is on, the television is on, all the appliances are on. So, in addition to what the fridge consumes while you're all out, and it continues to consume while you're all in, what you yourself consume is added to everything. Now, this is where the grid tie system gives you an advantage. When you design your grid tie system, then the panels, while the sun is out or while light is bright enough to send electricity in your home, the refrigerator uses that energy consumption. Yes, so you don't need to be paying the electric company for that. However, when the sun goes down during the evening, because you'd have had a net electric charge in your pocket, then when night comes, no sun, then you use up that net to offset what you'd have used on a daily basis without a grid tie. Doesn't that sound interesting? Yes. But again, like our video in the beginning, you need to start at the beginning. It means, therefore, you would want to know how many panels you would need, how many panels would offset during the day while you're at work, so that at night, that surcharge, even if you take it back from the electric grid, you would still balance off. And so at the end of the month, you'd see a huge savings. And this is where this half of our presentation will help you. Again, you can download the loads list, because that will give you an idea of your daily consumption. And so with that daily consumption, you can cut that in half to say, okay, the electric company will cover half of this, and so my solar system will cover the other half. You see a huge savings there? Yes, that's something we can benefit from when we do the grid tie. So, again, we will start with our loads list. So, look at this presentation as I go through how we can start with our grid tie design. See what size inverter we would need, and then from there, we'd know how many panels we would need for the entire year, whether spring, summer, autumn, or winter. As you can see on our screen, here's a template of an array sizing for a grid tie design. Now, when we talk about array sizing, we're specifically talking about how many panels you would need to mount, whether on your roof or on a pole mounted structure, so as to give you the amount of energy that you would need during the day while the sun is out. For this particular example that you're looking on, and if you notice I've already inputted the figures, the examples will be taken from uh, electrical data from a sun power X21 335 black module or solar panel, and the inverter that we'll be using, for example, is the Sunny Boy 3800 US 240 volt inverter. So let's go back to our template. Now, the temperature adjustment equation, as you can see here, since we need our modules to work all year round, for countries that have hot and cold climates, then you want your modules to be producing electricity to your home all year round. It means, therefore, to come to a compromise, as it were, we would need to find out the number of panels that will work both in the cold time of the year as well as the hot time of the year. For those of us who live in hot climate, like in my country here, where I am from, we do not experience any snow or anything like that. We have sun all year round right here in the Caribbean. So this also will help us, because when it comes to the cooler months, yes, the temperature will drop. The temperature will have an effect on the modules. So we have to take this equation, this template into consideration as well. So let me look at the North American climate, for example, of which I've used the figures here. Now, follow me as I go along. For cold temperatures, so that's for the winter months, which would begin in late October, November, December, January, and maybe right to the end of February, we would need to know how to size the number of modules or panels that we would put on our roof. Now, the first thing is the temperature coefficient of voltage for our PV module. V open circuit C per degree Celsius. Now, where would we get that information? We would go right to our module specification. So as I said earlier, we're using the sun power as an example. So we'll use the X21 335 black. Now, if you notice, the nominal power here is 335 watts. What it means? That by name, it is when the sun is at its peak, it should be giving you a nominal power of 335 watts. If you scroll down with me, right down to voltage temperature coefficient, VOC, you notice it is minus 167.4 millivolts per degree Celsius. But if we look back in our template, it asks for volts open circuit per degrees Celsius. It means, therefore, we'd have to convert our millivolts to volts. So that would mean now dividing by 1,000. And that is how we come up with our negative 0.1674 volts per degree Celsius. Now, let's take an arbitrary temperature, as it were. So let's say in your area of the wood, in your neck of the woods, your temperature drops to minus 5 degrees, as it were. Then we'll input our minus 5 here. So the change in voltage due to the temperature would be 5.02. We'll come back now to our module specs to ascertain the open circuit voltage of the module, VOC. So going back, we look for open circuit voltage, and mark you, this open circuit voltage is when the panel has no load. So there's no inverter, there's nothing is being drawn, no energy is being drawn. So you're sizing when it's just the sunlight hitting the panel all by itself. So that open circuit voltage would be 67.9. So we'd input that 67.9. So our adjusted maximum voltage for the module at standard temperature for open circuit would be 72.92. So you notice a jump from 67 to 72.9. And mark you, as I said, there is no load being drawn. This is just raw sunlight hitting the panel, and it is pushing out that voltage. Now for hot temperature, when the temperature falls, so for the summer months, for example, we'd search now for the temperature coefficient of power, which is the voltage maximum power per degree Celsius. Again, we go back to our module specs. Where would we find that? Incidentally, where we have voltage temperature coefficient VOC, we don't have for VMP. So how would we come to that? Manufacturers, if they don't give us the VMP, then they usually give us the power temperature coefficient, PMPP. Now what is it here in this spec? Minus 0.3% per degree Celsius rise. It means now we convert this percentage from 0.3 to 0.003. So it would become now 0.003 per rise in temperature. So coming back, if you notice here in the notes, in our notes, temperature coefficient minus VMP per degrees or rise in temperature is the voltage, the maximum power, times for this was based on a book, a range here, but for the specific module that we're using, the manufacturers have given us the more accurate figure. What the book gave us is a range that can be used here. So since we have the actual specification here, we would put the 0.3% or 0.003 rise in degrees Celsius. Then we would times it by the maximum power voltage. And what is our VMP? Let's look. Here, our rated voltage, 57.3. So in our example here, it would be 57.3 times 0.003. And when we calculate that, we get minus 0.1719. So that would be now our temperature coefficient of power for our PV module for hot temperature. Now, our ambient design temperature. Now, ASHRAE give us a 2% design margin. Now, what is our ASHRAE? ASHRAE, as you note in the notes here, ASHRAE temperature is based on an additional 2% of the current temperature of the location under consideration. Our example here, let's say your temperature rises to 33 degrees. Then by adding that 2%, so from our example here, 33 times 1.02, that would give us 33.66 degrees Celsius or 34 degrees Celsius rise. So we would now input that 34 degrees here. Now, our next line, temperature addition due to array mounting. Again, on the right of our screen, array mounting temperature consideration for array 6 inches or less above the roof. If you're putting it with use 35 degrees. For array above 6 inches over the roof, 30 degrees. If it's a pole mounted array, then it will be 25 degrees Celsius. So for our consideration here, we're saying that you're mounting your modules on your roof 6 inches or less above the roof. So we'll use 35 degrees Celsius here. We've input that in. And so our change in voltage due to temperature here now becomes minus 7.56. Next, we look at the maximum power of the module, VMP. Again, let's go back to our module. What would be our maximum voltage? Here, our rated voltage, VMPP, would be 57.3. So we input 57.3 here, and so we come to an adjusted minimum voltage for module at standard temperature 49.74. So we know the adjusted maximum voltage for cold temperature 72.92. We know the adjusted minimum voltage for hot temperature 49.74. Now this takes us to our inverter. What role does the inverter play? Well, remember, the current from the modules when the sun hits them is transferred to the inverter. The inverter is what produces the energy. And so, because unlike our battery-based system, where you have the charge controller that would regulate the amount of energy that is coming from the panels into the inverter, for a grid-tie system, there is no charge controller. It means, therefore, inside the inverter, there is a mechanism that needs to regulate that. Now, in order to regulate that amount of energy coming in so as not to damage the inverter, we will have to ensure that the energy that comes from the module is not over the specification of the manufacturers of the inverter. Now, as we had mentioned earlier, we'll be using the Sunny Boy 3800 inverter. Now, what's the spec that the manufacturer says? The maximum DC voltage, that is the voltage that comes from the modules or the solar panels to the inverter, should not exceed 600 volts. 600 volts. And the minimum DC voltage, nominal voltage, is 310. Now, how do these two figures factor in our design consideration? Well, this is how they factor in. The size inverter that we can afford to put in our homes will determine the number of panels that we put on our roof. Let me repeat that. The size inverter that we choose to put in our homes, to power our homes, determine the number of panels, the number of solar panels that we put on our roof to power that inverter. So for this example, as we said, we are using the Sunny Boy 3800. Maximum voltage that should come in 600, minimum 310. So from our template here, inverter maximum input voltage 600. Temperature adjusted voltage from our page for cold temperatures 72.92. 72.92. So the maximum module per string is 8.23. But we know we can't have 0.23 of a module. So we round it off to the nearest whole number. Now for hot climate and module degradation. Now you might be wondering, what is module degradation? Module degradation has to do with the years of service of your modules or your solar panels. Now, solar panels are designed to work for a maximum of 25 years. However, panels have worked beyond 25 years. But as the years go on, the constant sunlight hitting, the workings of it degrades. So some of the protons may leave over the years, and so it degrades. So the entire string, as the years go on, may reduce. So what do? You factor in for that years of service, that degradation, so that by 25 years, your power output would not have dropped significantly. And so in our template here, we have input that module degradation in our calculation. So inverter minimum input voltage, as we remember from our Sunny Boy, 310, DC nominal voltage, 310. Our temperature adjusted voltage from here, 49.74. That would give us now a minimum module per string of 7.48. Okay? Now, how many panels would you need for this particular example? For hot temperature, 8, 7.48, roughly 7.5. We can round it up to 8 as it were. So overall, you would need 8 panels. And that's how easy it is to do the grid tie. Unlike the battery-based system, which is more components, but as I had alluded to earlier in this video, visit how to size a battery-based solar system, and that will give you an idea. So you have flexibility. If you want to come off the grid totally, you can do the battery base. If you want to let the grid pay you during the day and you pay them during the night and offset, you'd see savings, then you can implement this. So want to thank you. Visit the website renewableenergy2.com, TOO.com, and robzidon.blogspot. Input your name and email and start designing. Happy design, and look out for the next series of video.